Halito today himagneta oglahashailaka achugma Tammy Greer Hachstein Ashobaji Nana Hoglahashmi Jajigma Hachibafu Kana Shobaji Hachi Mabatit Hachibai Kana Antana Shobaji Yakoke.
We are here at the Southern Miss Medicine Wheel Garden because we were supposed to have an in-person tour of the garden, but we have this coronavirus going on, and so I wanted to give you a virtual tour of the garden. And before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about how this garden was formed. In 2004, I met Joe Bohannon. He was in the social work program on campus and was getting a PhD in ed leadership at the same time. Also, he was the faculty advisor of the Golden Eagles Intertribal Society, a Native-focused student group here on campus. Joe started the Geist group and a powwow on campus when he came. When we met, he asked if I was Native and then asked if I wanted to be a co-advisor for the group and help out with the powwow and all the other activities they had going on. And I thought about it because it's a lot for one person to be the faculty advisor of a group of minority students who, you know, sometimes we're not even recognized as still being around anymore. And so we have to do a lot of outreach in order to even make a difference in our world and in our community. So I said, sure, I'll come on. And he said, well, then what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to add to the group? What do you want to add to the university? What do you want to add to what we have going on? And I said, well, I mean, I love the powwow because, you know, I mean, I used to dance when I was a kid too. So, and my kids dance. So I love that. But I also felt like, and I told Joe this, that, you know, the powwow comes and the powwow goes, and there's no Native constant presence on campus, something that says, you know, we are welcoming of our Native American brothers and sisters and tribal members from here and elsewhere on this campus. And I said, I'd really like to see something like that. And he said, okay, so what? And I said, well, the elders have been telling me that we are losing our plant ways and that we're not, you know, respectful of the plants anymore, and we don't understand them very well anymore, and we're definitely not in relationship with our plant brothers and sisters anymore, and that, you know, they don't really have an opportunity to pass down even what they know about the plants and what they remember to the youth. And so maybe what we should do is build a garden and fill it up with native plants. And then people can walk, instead of just coming across something in the woods, they can come to our garden and we can populate it with plants that our elders used and the Southeastern American Indians used. And they can teach to the youth about these plants from our garden. And he said, that's a great idea. And then he started looking around, I guess, because he came to me with a book and he said, what if we put it in this shape? And it was the shape of a medicine wheel. And the book was called Medicine Wheel Gardens. And I thought that was an awesome idea. And then we had to figure out where the garden would be located. And so I thought they would put us out in Podunk, you know, some kind of woods somewhere over by the research facility or something like that. But I had a friend on campus, Greg Lassen, and so he was CFO at the time. And so I went with Greg, and I went to Greg, and I said, you know, we want to start a little garden. And he said, oh, okay. And I said, so where's some places we could do that? And he said, well, let me get back with you. So he came back, and he said, come on and follow me. Let's walk around. And so we walked over here, and I would like for you, Khalid, to pan this area. And he walked over here and he said, you know, how about right here? And I went, oh my gosh, we're in the middle of campus, literally. We're behind the dance building, behind the international building, behind the liberal arts building, a central location. And I said, okay. And he said, well, but you're going to have to tend it. And I said, okay. And I didn't really know how to tend a garden. I grew up with gardens. We had gardens all our lives, and we always ate out of the garden. But I wasn't a big part of that tending process. And so I said, okay. So we went through the process of writing a little grant to the SIVA Corporation. which sponsors grassroots efforts like that. We got some money. We got enough money to put rocks around the garden, these river rocks right here that you'll see. We got enough money to put topsoil down, and we did not get enough money to buy plants, nor could we have bought the plants we wanted. We wanted, because what we wanted were plants that were here before the Europeans came. Basically, they're considered weeds out in the environment, and mostly they're not for sale. And so we didn't know how to, or I didn't know how to populate this garden with native plants. So at first we just let anyone adopt a plot and plant whatever they wanted, wherever they wanted. We didn't really know how to populate the garden with natives at that point. So the idea was just to hold the space. And we did. We held the space. I used to recruit native students at powwows and other native focused events, and I would bring powwow flyers and Geist photos. And anytime I'd go recruiting, I'd put a photo up of the medicine wheel garden. And when somebody would ask about it, I'd say, yeah, well, this is what it is and this is what it's for. But really, it's not serving that function right now because we don't know how to get native plants into that garden. And my idea was that I would hold the intention. I would bring the intention with me wherever I went. The intention of transforming this garden into a place where elders could come and we could learn about what they knew about these plants, and we could not forget these plants who, saved our lives and kept us alive for thousands of years. And I held that space on that display board. And when people would ask, I remember I went to the Choctaw Indian Fair in 2009. It was in July. And this was just a typical day, and I responded like I always responded. So there was this, I was set up kind of by the bathrooms, and I got a free space because it was just an educational booth. And I had friends over there too. So I was set up right next to the restroom, and this elderly couple passed by, and they went in to the restroom, and I saw them go in, and one of them came out before the other. And they came, and they were just standing at my booth, waiting on the other. The woman came out before the man, and so they stood there waiting. She stood there waiting on him. And she introduced herself as Merrill Willis, and when her husband came out, she introduced him as Joe Willis. And so they said, what do you have right there? And I said, well, that's our medicine wheel garden on the campus of Southern Miss. And they said, well, really, we've heard of that? And I said, yeah. Well, really? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, okay, but it's not, and this was my typical spiel, it's not exactly what we want for it to be, because what we want for it to be is a native plant garden, a garden of plants that our ancestors used for tools and dyes and weapons and food and drink and building materials. And we want to be able to teach people about these plants and not forget these plants, because they have been with us forever and they have carried us through hard times and good times, and we don't want to forget them. But the garden is not that right now, because we don't really know how to get those native plants into the garden. And she listened, and we talked about maybe 30 minutes or so. And in the end, she said something that several people had said before. She said, Meryl said, we can help you with that. And I thought, okay, because I'd had people say that before, and they would bring 4 or 5 native plants, and I would put them in the garden, and I would have 4 or 5 more native plants than I had before. And I was perfectly fine with that. And so we exchanged information, because they lived way up in Oxford, Mississippi, and, we're down here in Hattiesburg. So we just exchanged information, and I thought, well, maybe we'll get 4 or 5 plants. And so, a month passed or so, and she called me, and she said, we're ready to come down and bring you some native plants. And I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. And so she came down in a Toyota Sequoia, and the back of she had the chairs out, like the middle seats out, because it was just her and Joe coming from Oxford. So she had those middle seats laying down, and the back was full up with these 5-gallon tub buckets, maybe more like 25-gallon buckets, tubs, full up with plants. And then behind the sequoia, she was pulling a flatbed trailer that was also full up with plants. And overnight, it became a native plant garden, exactly what I was interested in. So that's how this garden came to be the way it is now. In October of 2012, after we had a native plant conference in Hattiesburg, and people had visited the garden, and John Guyton, one of the native plant people, could not get into the garden because the paths were made out of rocks, and he was in a wheelchair. I asked the university to pave the paths of the garden. And so in October of 2012, University of Physical Plant paved the paths of the garden. Joe and Merrill had a friend who sold paint for concrete, and they got us some of that paint for our garden. Okay, so right now we are facing the eastern direction. And just as the sun rises in the east, everything comes into existence from the east. The east is where stars and mountains and trees, civilizations, babies, new projects, manuscripts, building plans, paintings, music scores, dance routines, scientific studies, and all of our relationships are born. We come into the world and our spiritual selves grow and are tended here in the east. So the east represents the spiritual aspects of ourselves. When we orient ourselves towards what is eternal, focus on what all of the great spiritual teachings call us toward, kindness, we are being respectful to the eastern direction. The eastern direction also represents the season of the year that is spring, so all the new things coming out, budding in the spring. It's represented by the color yellow, like when the sun comes up. The sun is usually represented in yellow. And all of the Asian tribes of the earth are represented in the eastern direction. Got some little berries on it right now, but the juniper is good for first off, it's a sacred herb. It's one of the 4 sacred herbs, so cedar. It's good for cleansing yourself. It's also good, these berries are good for seasoning. Our ancestors used them for seasoning like meats and everything. They say that if you chew on juniper berries, the ones that the plant has let go, because the ones that are on there right now are a little bit, they're not ready to eat. But the ones that the plant has let go, you can see them get dark. If they're light colored like this, they're not ready. When they turn dark like this right here, they're ready to eat. They're ready to use for seasoning. And I've heard that helps your, and they taste fantastic. That helps your congestion, your lungs, bronchitis, things like that, things that are respiratory related. Juniper berries are good for that. These white flowers that you're seeing right here are all some kind of berry, some kind of dewberry, really, dewberry. Let's see, this right here sticking out is wax myrtle. Wax myrtle is a good seasoning too. If you cut it right now and let it dry, oh my gosh, you can put it in sauces and spaghetti and things like that. It's an awesome seasoning. This little plant right here is what's called Spanish dagger, and sure enough, we're going to have to trim that, because if you run into that, it'll cut you and make you bleed. Right here, what's happening is that it's flowering out, and over here too. That one right there will look like this, and when it does, these flowers, I'm not going to eat them now because I see the bugs have taken their toll on them. But these flowers are perfectly edible and taste fantastic, and make a salad. Like, put them in your salad, they taste awesome. Let's see what else we have right here. Strawberries. We have strawberries on this path. Look here, Khalid. Bend down and get a picture of that. Little strawberries. I see some flowers in there. Yeah. The flowers that'll make the berries that will be strawberries right there. This is an awesome plant right here, and we'll see it again. This is Elderberry Bush. So like that sambuca that you drink, or that people are drinking right now, everybody's drinking elderberry. It's an antiviral, so elderberry juice that comes from this plant right here, and you can see it's leafing out on us. Let's see what else we have. Let's see what we can. This right here. Looks like there's a honeybee in there. This right here, I want you to get real close up, right there. Is a Yopon holly. You see the flowers on it in the 4 directions. The flowers come out in 4 directions. This is a Yopon holly. It was the leaves of this Yopon, the new leaves especially, have caffeine in them. They're caffeinated. The leaves are caffeinated. So this plant was called beloved by the tribal people of this area, and it was traded as far north as Cahokia, where they found it in shell cups, left-handed Welch shell cups that were cut for drinking purposes. This plant was very important to the Southeastern American Indians because it was also the foundation for our what we call our black drink, which was served at ceremonies, at the green corn ceremony, our yearly renewal ceremony. This plant has all kinds of awesome stuff going on with it. Like for example, the flowers are in 4s, and the seeds come in 4s. The berry, when the berry comes, if you split this berry when it's ripe, it's got 4 seeds inside of it. 4 is a sacred number. It represents balance. And so this plant has all kinds of 4s that go along with it. So I see why they called it beloved. But the flowers, you wouldn't even notice them. They're so tiny and so pretty. This right here is the weeping variety. There are 3 varieties of Yopon. This one weeps, it's hanging out and it's hanging down, it's weeping. But we also have a bush variety of Yopon and a tree variety, and we'll see those as well. And now we are facing the southern direction. It is in the south that we experience our youth. We're not any babies any longer, but in the south we grow as young planets and trees and rocks and nations and children. Musical scores and dance routines are practiced and practiced and practiced again. Bicycle riding is practiced in the South. Papers and books are written and rewritten here too. It's also in the South that we develop our emotional selves. When we need to put emotions into a project or relationship, we do that important work in the South. When we make sure to stay healthy in relationships that are supportive and find our passion and take care of our emotional selves, we are being respectful to the southern direction. As a young child, one of the first things we develop is emotion regulation. So little bitty children cry when they're hungry. Little bitty babies do. But children no longer cry when they're hungry. That's emotion regulation, and that develops in the South, and it's a real important development for little children. The southern direction also represents the season of the year that is summer. It is represented by the color red, and it represents all of the American Indian tribes of the earth. So in my tribe, we use this to make palmetto huts out of. And my grandma lived in one. She said with her whole family, one for cooking, one for sleeping. These palmetto berries right here It's hard to get the palmetto to come up from a berry, but you can. It's hard to get the palmetto to really to transplant it too, because it's attached to its mama. So when you see it branching out there, it's attached to the mama. You got to get a long piece of its root. But these are edible as well. And problem with them is that there's a little bit of fruit, which is very sweet and very tasty, and a lot of seed. This plant is called Thuja occidentalis. And it too is a smudging herb, but it's like a flat cedar, but it's also good for your bronchial tubes and all. Oh yay! It's coming out. Woohoo! I want to show you this one, but we don't. It's not out yet. You can't see anything yet. This is a beautyberry that's leafing out right here. Beautyberry, well, first off, it's got these beautiful berries on it, but secondly, which are edible. They don't taste too much like anything. They're not too sweet, but you can put them in with other things like muscadines or blueberries or something like that, and they'll make a real good jam to give it some substance. And they won't change the flavor because they don't have much of a flavor. But beautyberry is used by people the leaves of the beautyberry have been shown to be able to repel mosquitoes and bugs. So people would take it and long time ago and wipe it on themselves, or put it in under your bedding, or put it where you lay down, or where your horses lay down or your dogs lay down, to keep the bugs away. Let's keep walking. And now we're facing the western direction. It's in the west that we grow as mature beings. So those musical scores and ballets and movies and operas and manuscripts are fully developed, sent out into the world, published in the West. Laws are adopted here as well. The West is where we develop our physical selves. When we eat healthy, stay active, take care about how we treat our bodies, the physical aspects of others, the earth, and all of its beings, we are respecting the western direction. The western direction also represents the season of the year that is fall. It's represented by the color black, and it represents all of the African tribes of earth. I need to take that one out, please. This is St. John's wort. People use it to regulate their mood. It's not flowered out yet. It's got a beautiful flower on it. It's not flowered out, but it's a mood regulator. Cane. Lord, there are 100 uses for cane. One is this cane used to be used for blowguns. So the long pieces of cane, big tall pieces of cane used for blowguns. Also used for built basket making. So you can cut this cane, strip it, make basket material. It makes basket material, baskets that'll last 100 years for you. All kinds of uses for cane. I'll show you some when I get home, because I've got some. This is our little crabapple. And last year, it actually produced crabapples. And here's some crabapple seeds that I'm going to grab. Oh my gosh. And look at the little flowers, Khalid. How pretty. I got some crabapple seeds I can give away. Let's see. Here. I don't want to waste them. I want to give them to somebody. over here, we have an eastern red cedar, which is not really a cedar tree, it's a juniper tree, but we have a juniper right here that makes those juniper berries. The one over there was a creeping juniper. It kind of gets along the ground and then comes up. This is a tree though. This is the girl tree, and right here next to it, the big tall one, is the boy tree. And they make a lot of berries together, let me tell you. And this right here is a yopon holly that is just the tree variety of yopon. So you can see the flowers are the same, the berries are the same, but this one is the tree yopon, so it's not weeping, it's not hanging over. All right, so right here we have a little sumac bush coming up. Now I use sumac for a lot of things, and one thing I use sumac for is to dye material. It's got a lot of tannic acid in it, and so I take the leaves and the berries and sort of treat material so that I can dye it, and it'll absorb the color better. Sumac, but also these berries that will come off of this tree will taste like lemonade, sort of that sour lemonade-y taste. And so this was the original lemonade right here, sumac. And now we are facing the north. The north is where the elders among us reside, our own elders who may not even reach 100 years, elder trees who reach several thousand years, and elder stars who reach several billion years are all represented in the north. The north as well is where we grow and tend our mental selves. Whenever we grow in knowledge and understanding, we give respect to the northern direction. It is also in the north that we, all of us, plants, animals, rocks, mountains, and planets, even ideas, grow into old age and pass away. It is in the north that projects, relationships, buildings, but also bad habits and useless laws end. When endings come, you can take heart and stay on the wheel, because even as these important and beloved members of our universe, communities, and parts of ourselves pass, new relationships, projects, ideas, and stars are literally just around the corner in the eastern direction being born. The northern direction also represents the season of the year that is winter. It is represented by the color white, and it represents all of the Caucasian tribes of the earth. All right, this right here is called button snake root. And button because it looks like it's a button. And snake root because some things that I've read say that it was used as a snake remedy, but I've heard from other people who make medicine that snake root doesn't mean it's a root to cure snake bites. Snake root means that whatever medicine you're giving someone, if you add this to it, it'll make it more potent. So I've heard both of those things about this plant. And anyway, it's a beautiful plant. We have one on this side as well. This right here, what's coming up, this is the bush is another beautyberry, but this right here is coral honeysuckle. Now, isn't that beautiful? Can you see it? Coral honeysuckle was used to make baskets. So this twine right here, this vine was cut, dried out, and then wet again, and used to make baskets. And also, it's a beautiful plant. It's just beautiful. I want to go over here a little bit, Cleet, because I want to get you to get a picture of these Buckeye. So this is a red Buckeye tree, and if you look at, you can see the coral honeysuckles coming off of it, but that right there is the red Buckeye flower. red buckeye was used. It was ground up. The root actually of the plant and also the buckeyes that come off of the plant were ground up, thrown in the water, and used to stupefy fish. So when we had our green corn ceremony, we would have to feed a lot of people. And the easiest way to feed a lot of people is to go and get a bunch of fish and dry them out and smoke them like that. Well, so if you go to a pond or something and you grind up the root of that plant or the buckeyes of that plant and you throw them in the water, it deoxygenates or puts some kind of chemical in water, and the fish will come up. The little fish first, the bigger fish later. So we could feed a lot of people. You could get a lot of food that way, and that's the way our ancestors did it. Here's what I'm doing as I go is what you're seeing me do with this in my hand is put tobacco in each, and tobacco is an offering, like a thanksgiving, like thank you so much for your help, thank you so much for what you've done for us. Or if you want someone to do something for you, sometimes you make an offering of tobacco. And what I'm doing is giving this garden tobacco in thanksgiving for what she's teaching us today. So she's getting a gift for what she's teaching. You know, our southeastern Native American ancestors were resilient. They had to be. They lived on the edge. Their communities were near constantly changing streams, creeks, rivers, bayous, gulfs, and oceans. Our ancestors farmed corn, beans, and pumpkins, the three sisters, and supplemented their harvests with pecans, pine nuts, acorns, hickory nuts, walnuts, blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, persimmons, and muscadines. Because they had an agriculture that sustained them all year, our Native American ancestors lived in houses made of mud or clay with wood posts and swamp cane, straw, or palmetto roofs. Their lives depended on their responses to the changing seasons, vegetation productivity, and animal availability. We have evidence that our ancestors adapted these environments to increase productivity and sustainability of the community, sometimes by burning the forest, sometimes by building mounds. They traded resources all over the U.S. with evidence of caffeinated tea leaves of our coastal Yopon holly traded as far north as Cahokia Mound Complex in Missouri. They also moved whole communities in response to resource depletion, changing rivers, and European settlements. Our southeastern native plants also are resilient. They can adapt slowly over time to environmental changes by altering their growing, low and squat in colder climates, but tall and lean in warmer climates, by forming more shallow or deeper roots, and by moving further north or south in subsequent generations. Our native plants can, with care, thrive along with us as our companions on this journey. They are undisputedly necessary for the survival of southeastern American Indian material cultures. Our palmetto huts with willow frames, supplejack vine basket handles, palmetto, swamp cane, longleaf pine baskets, cane and elderberry blowguns, hickory rabbit sticks, and stickball sticks. They are the sources of our medicines, and they still have much to teach us about being human and how to live in community. I'm reminded of all of this as I tend our Southern Miss Medicine Wheel garden. The wax myrtle and the swamp cane teach me how to set boundaries for my own sake and for the sake of others who need protection or who need room to grow. I learn about respecting the boundaries of others when I get too close and am not careful near the Spanish dagger and blackberry bushes. I've lost blood over those lessons. But then again, blackberry bushes provide nutritious food, great tasting tea, and helpful medicine. Spanish dagger is very useful for keeping critters, large and small, away from protected areas. And also the root is soap for cleansing, and the dagger-shaped leaves are cordage for building. I have friends like those plants who on the one hand have personalities that jab and poke so that I have to take care around them, but on the other hand have great qualities like fierceness, honesty, and loyalty. Most all plants live in communities, preferring the company of specific species. Some plants, like the very medicinal wild ginger, rely on the shade of others just to survive and remind us that community is necessary and that our communities down here can be quite diverse. Our ancestors taught us that native plants truly are our brothers and sisters, our relatives and our teachers. We need to remember that as we plan and plant for our futures. I want for you guys to take care and join me as soon as we can in the medicine garden.